started with biology for writers. I'd love to see you all here. We are going to start by introducing our wonderful, amazing panelists. We are going to start at the far end and come down with your name, if you would like to share your pronouns, and then what is your biology deal? What do you do with bio? That means these people should listen to you. So let's start with Bree.
Wow, that's kind of a tall order. So my name is Brittany Kerschner, and my pronouns are she, her. My area of specialty, I guess, I'm actually in real life an English professor. However, I have a pile of degrees in ecology and an emphasis on entomology and prairie and wetland restoration and reconstruction. So a lot about ecosystems and how they all work together. Animals and plants and funguses.
I'm Tiana, she, her. I am a microbiologist and I research bacteriophages. And bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria. So there's like a lot of applications, especially right now with there being so many resistant antibiotics. So with bacteriophages, you could use possibly, well, it's been proven so far to fight bacterial infections. And so that's what I do is research bacteriophages and try and see, can we make them better? And what I mean by better is like how humans would think of them as better if they could, kill the bacteria that bothers us. So, yeah.
Hello, my name is Lathan Murrell, he, him pronouns. I study biophysics and social anthropology, and while it does not apply to my makes the money pays bills jobs, it does apply to my science education that I do, as well as my years as a martial artist and doing martial arts instruction. My big focuses are very much molecular biology and sports science, so I'm very interested in the mechanisms through which things like how our muscles and bones change depending on how we exercise. I'm interested in mechanisms of how foods we eat, the air we breathe affect how our bodies and minds function in everyday life, and in general, just an overall kind of health and whatnot. And so this panel interests me because this is a thing that I see a lot, both in just general fiction, but also in science fiction, in martial arts and action fiction. I have many thoughts on how long it takes to recover from being thrown out a window and tossed onto a car. But things like that. So, and that is why I'm here.
And I'm Anessa, she, her pronouns. My PhD is in evolutionary biology, but research-wise, I am a paleontologist, which people sometimes get excited by until I tell them I do not work on dinosaurs. I'm so sorry. I work on the early evolution of mammals, how we came to look the way we do these days, especially in terms of what we eat and how we eat it. These days, I also sometimes teach anatomy at The Ohio State University, where I am employed. Yes, we are fantastic, thank you. So we are going to launch right in with a question that maybe you've already answered for yourselves because you are here. But why should you, as a writer, bother? We all know that you can put out a film that makes buckets and buckets of money while safely ignoring science. So what is the point in bothering to get it right? And this time we want to start with Tiana, if you're ready to answer, and then rotate who gets to start.
I actually used to not think it was that important to get it right, because I was like, everybody has a basic understanding of science. And then the internet showed me that a lot of people do not have a basic understanding of science. And it was really shocking to me. I was quite surprised. And now I'm like, oh no, it's so important to get it right. Because people have to, people make arguments, against science. That doesn't even make sense. Science is literally just finding out what is. It's not possible to make an argument against finding out what is. It blows my mind. And so now I feel like in our media, it is very important to get it right because that's what everyone is consuming. And a lot of people form ideas about like their basic way of thinking based off of the media that they consume. So, yeah.
Actually, kind of building onto that, like, when we talk about stories, we talk about media, we tend to talk about it in a very kind of like casual, this is something fun that's like I'm just doing because it entertains me. But I think it's really important to understand from that, like, biologically speaking, our brains are wired to process information in ways that is efficient as possible, and that is manifested in our telling of stories. We have historically told stories to convey concepts and ideas about the world in a way that is easy for us to digest and process, and then go out into that world. So there is I feel a certain level of responsibility on storytellers, particularly ones that are very prominent, to give a fair and accurate representation of the world within the bounds that what there might be, like, you know, spaceships and alien robots and whatnot. But like, actually, this is something that came up earlier. Is like, you can have a story where like you have all these weird, bizarre fantasy sci-fi elements in them, but like, are the people who are there on the street, are they an actual like representative of like a population? Like, are there many different like skin colors, genders, are people in the audience, or is it like, you know, an entire city of just random white people that are like that? That like you can have the other elements, but if those other elements that where we ground ourselves to aren't really there, that creates a lot of issue. I think that's the same thing when accurate science is not present in a story, even if there's going to be some very weird bizarre elements that aren't easily explained. If the basic if you get attacked by a werewolf, yeah, that's weird. But if the basics of like how to treat a wound, or how to like deal with some other kind of infection, or like what you're going to expect when you go to a doctor's office and they're going to ask you what's happening, if those things aren't there, that really gives an unrealistic expectation about the world in general. So those elements, I think also people focus more so much on making the weird science of like the MacGuffin element important, that they ignore the general, like, everyday, still normal science that's going to be in your story that is really, I would say, even more important.
Can I build off that one step further? Yeah, stories shape who we are, and they tell us what we should care about. And, you know, one of the things that I think of is most people had no idea what mycology was until they played The Last of Us, right? And that's not, is that a spoiler? Sorry. And then suddenly we had all of these budding amateur mycologists and people realizing that, hey, if we don't have fungi and detrivores, our entire planet is going to collapse in on itself, right? And so it taught people to care about this organism or these types of organisms. And, you know, what you write about is, you know, it tells people what they should care about. And how you write about it is also going to kind of inform what they know about this subject, right? And people were super interested in the cordyceps and like, oh my gosh, it makes ants and a couple of other related species into zombies. And no, it can't jump to people, just so you know, that's not a thing. But it really made people interested. And suddenly, like there's just this boom, I'm even looking at my local community, it's all these young people who play the game or watch the show, and they're interested in learning more about mycology and how they grow and why they're important to our ecosystems. And so what you write and the stories you tell and the media that we consume tells us what we should value and why. And with global climate change, which is apparently controversial, but we're going to just go into the assumption that it's happening. It's so important to continue to encourage people to care about the environment and care about the imminent issues that are going to happen and how our world is going to change because of climate change. And it already is. It already is. Like, for example, our area here, as far as botany and planting, we were a zone 5. And now we have been rezoned as 4A, which doesn't seem like
Other way around.
Oh, other way around. I'm sorry. Other way around. So we were zoned for 4A and now we're zoned 5. Thank you. Which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it means that we're going to have a whole bunch of species that are suddenly endangered right here. And they're going to be threatened because the ecology is changing, things are warming up, and species that are very sensitive to that are going to die. And these are the things we need to write about. I mean, dystopian fiction is in right now. It's hot. And, you know, it's going to show people the kinds of things that we should value or we should care about, who we are. Our values are who we are, and we get that through our stories. So,
yeah, all fantastic points. And just building off of Bree's latest example, sometimes science will give you a better answer to a question you were already asking. So even if you're in this strictly for self-interested reasons, if you look at the example of The Last of Us, that's taking something that somebody was already set on doing, a zombie setting, and giving it a better, more interesting, more compelling answer to that question of why are there zombies? Is it completely one-to-one with something that can happen in reality? No. But by grounding it in biology that exists, they got a better answer to a question they were already asking. So to pivot and give a bit of a reverse, are there any things where you think you can give writers a free pass in saying, you can ignore this bit of biology or it's not practical, or places where you find you don't care as much? Lathan wants to discuss this time.
Yeah, and actually I think that's something that is really important, and I think part of like the daunting idea of like doing any kind of science research for a story is like, I think we get the idea is like everything has to be exactly correct and all the math has to fit here and you have to have these tables and whatnot. For the most of it is like the average person is not going to like recognize a lot of the terms or concepts in like deep like scientific research and whatnot. You can pick out very certain concepts, very certain things like types of cells, types of species of fungi or whatnot, and use that as like your story points. But you don't necessarily have to have like a detailed research paper in your story to kind of make that work. Also, I kind of like call this writing up to the event horizon. Your science really needs to kind of make sense, fitting with like different things, up to wherever your like MacGuffin plot point is, and back on top of and like an example of this, one of my friends wrote a book about people developing superpowers, and we talked about the idea of a comet that goes by, and that there are particles of a virus that were part of this comet that fell onto the Earth. And we talked about how the virus would actually work, and how you can like have unearthed bits of viral particles that are in ice, that are or in permafrost that is like currently melting. We talked about like how the bodies were going to respond to it, how it would feel like flu-like symptoms, the timeline particularly of how long it would take to kind of see some results, and that in the process of the virus going through someone's system, it would deposit some DNA that would interact with something in human DNA that gives superpowers. The something in human DNA, whatever weird gene that was being activated and interacting with the new DNA from the virus, we don't need to know how that makes your ability to like manipulate magnetic fields and like turn into liquid and all that. That stuff is like, that's our event horizon. Like inside of this black hole, the physics gets weird. You don't have to necessarily solve that. But knowing all of this stuff, that including recognizing, oh, I have a cold or a flu, I should probably react differently, or the dialogue of like, I wasn't feeling well today, so I stayed home from work as opposed to like got everyone else sick with whatever I had that day. That little bit of dialogue where it's just like the norm for this character is to like respond to an illness with actual caution and care, as opposed to just kind of like trying to power through something. That has a lot of merit, because then that sets the stage of a character reacting to a real and biological like event of you get sick, and like what is the appropriate response? What is the way to kind of interact with this? And that part of the story often gets overlooked. Is just as important as the part where they can now shoot like lasers out of their nipples. and then kind of piggybacking off of that is like my friend who did this, the research was he talked to me, he talked to a couple of other friends who work in different science fields just to get like some information on how to make this story kind of work. And it wasn't a lot of effort in that particular part. We're in an era too where it's easier to get access to this kind of information if we're willing to look for it. So I think it's also really important to think about when adding real science to a story is like he doesn't have to be a huge daunting task. Like they're pretty sure pretty much everyone on this panel, if someone comes up and is like, I'm working on a story about this, and I heard you're doing this, cool, would you be able to, like, pretty much I was like, yes, I will happily get, I can find a couple hours to like give you some feedback on how to do this thing. I think is something that's pretty accessible. So that is my point, is like, it's really more the background science going on up until your weird like plot device that you have to kind of worry about. And the plot device thing, like, if they are able to like turn into a giant bat and like create pollen that regenerates a whole forest, Mothra style, I'm not really questioning that particular point. But if whoever scientists are studying the regenerated forest are using like weird equipment that doesn't make any sense what they're doing, or they have or their titles or what they feel they studied don't match who would be out here, that's gonna be the one actually makes me go, that doesn't make any sense.
I think there's also some level of kind of suspension of disbelief with fantasy, because you can have science mixed in with fantasy as well, right? And I think of examples like, if humans were to grow wings on their back, we would technically be classified as a combination of an insect, because we would have 6 limbs, and mammal. And bird too, if we had feathers, how would you produce feathers? And I think in fantasy, some of that you can kind of like gloss over. Nobody's gonna be like, oh my gosh, you're a bug now. But I think you can start from a biological start, okay? How would this happen? Or, how would these species come to be naturally in this fantastical environment? What allows them to exist the way they do in their ecosystems, right? And I think that can come from a place of science, even though it's fantasy. When you're world building, you can start from a scientific biological starting point, and I think that will help enrich how you create your characters, how you create the creatures in the realm, the plants, the different types of interactions that the characters have with their environment. And you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details of the science of how people got wings, or the complicated explanation of what a centaur is, right? Because, is it a human all on the front half, or is it like human front skeleton all the way down to the pelvis, and then it's like a horse skeleton all the way down to the pelvis, which doesn't, that's always like the eternal question. How do they wear pants, right? And I think some of that, especially if it has any kind of a mythological origin, some of that you can just assume that your readers are going to suspend their disbelief, and it's going to be fine. But starting from a point of science, when you start writing your fantasy or fantastical novel, will help make it more real and more believable, I think.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that, I kind of feel like it depends on the genre, because like we were saying with like fantasy, and I think of action, but there's no physics in action movies at all. Like, and those are the genres I'm not really into. So I don't really like action. I don't really like fantasy. I'm a hardcore science fiction person. Although I do like horror. But I feel like for me, I get distracted by things like that. Like in fantasy, it's like, oh, like that can happen, but it's magic, so it can happen. But like I still will get stuck a little bit. So I think it largely depends on what you're writing. Like if you are writing science fiction, yes, it matters. Because for me, then I will get distracted and won't enjoy it. But I mean, again, to a point, like Lathan was saying, like, you don't have to get into the point where people are like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand what that is. And I feel like if you do a good enough job, because everyone's gonna have some mistakes or whatever, then Neil deGrasse Tyson will just come in and tweet, you know, like correct all of your incorrect science, and he'll fix it for you. So.
I see we do have people starting to get questions. If you could hold those till the end, I just want to make sure we get through as much of our core content as possible, but please hang on to that. And train of thought, to go along with what Tiana was just saying, I think you're exactly right that it's about genre, because in any genre there are going to be questions that no one is asking. So like, if you are in a space opera, no one is going to be asking why there are humanoid aliens. They are prepared to swallow that. They knew that was the price at the door. So if you're going to go out of your way, like Star Trek, perhaps, to try to answer that question, make it a good and not stupid answer, because nobody needed to know.
I just want to throw this out there. My partner and I just watched just this brilliant show called Scavenger's Reign.
I just saw the episode of that.
And I wanted to bring it up because it's about these people from a colony transport ship, basically. They're transporting supplies and people to a new colony, and they crash on this planet that is pretty hostile to human life. But it has completely evolved without people, without any kind of sentient overlord, controlling it. And there's no science as far as, why these things do the things they do, because they don't tell you, right? And so the characters go through all these bizarre experiences with the plants and the animals, I don't even think you could separate them because they're all like one connected organism. Really brilliant. They didn't go deep into the science, but it's such an incredible show.
So
So compelling.
it's called
Scavenger's Reign.
It's called Scavenger's Reign. I actually, funny thing is, I kind of feel like they do go deep into the science. They just don't tell you, because the way the world is actually built is it is an entire ecosystem. That, like, all the different creatures interact in a certain way. They have different kinds of behaviors. There are different regions on the planet that have different species on them. Like, it is clearly the way that the world that I've seen. So I haven't watched a little bit of it, but the way the world is built so far is like, what does a living ecosystem of different creatures look like? We know what ours looks like. What if we made a different one, different animal, different species, different creatures in it? And it looks very believable. And even though they don't tell you why these things work the way they do, there's no point where they're explaining what this creature is or what this is named, because the scavengers are not really, they're just trying to figure out how to get back home or survive. They're not really trying to catalog anything. But the way the world is built feels very authentic. And I think that's part of what I really like, where it's like, they don't have to necessarily explain why they do the things they do, but you can definitely tell that the ideas of evolution, of coevolution, of mutualistic relationships, of food chains were really well thought out in why this world was built the way it was and why it feels the way it does. And that's something I really enjoyed about what I've seen of the show so far.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, that often you don't need to explain, and trying to do so will probably draw attention to the points that make less sense while not really expanding on the points that do. So yeah, fantastic point there. Also, to pivot off something Lathan said earlier, we talked a little bit about, well, how do you learn this stuff if you are not yourself a biologist? You mentioned talking to people. I really can't recommend that one enough. Not just us. If you go on the website of your local university, you will find a list of people who don't get to talk to regular people enough. They are underpaid, their students don't appreciate them, and they would love to have a conversation with somebody who wants to talk about their fields. So if you can find someone at your local university who's working at a specialty that would be helpful to you, shoot them an email. If you find somebody in a more distant location, I'd be happy to Zoom call with people in Minnesota, even though I'm trapped in the hellscape that is Ohio. I'm sure there are lots of other people who would too. We love to talk. We're very talky people, especially in academia. That is my plug for where to find good resources because, in particular, you can tell when reading when somebody talks to a human who speaks biology versus when they tried to read a paper that might have been a little too much for them. Because somebody who just reads a paper and tries to stick that into fiction tends to look like they're wielding a sword that's a little too big for them because they will flop things onto the page that don't sit right. They'll use words that, well, technically those might be the right words, but that might not be a real way that they would be used. Whereas if you just have a conversation, you'll get to hear the cadence of how the issue is actually spoken about, the ways that it can be simplified. A lot of people who work in science are actually great communicators, and they really will talk to you in a way that will make it make sense. So, like Lathan said, it cannot plug enough talking to a human. So if we want to head down and give other people suggestions for resources on learning about this stuff.
Well, I do 100% agree. As a researcher, you don't get to talk about it, and even when you start to, most people do not care. So when you find someone that actually you can talk with, like you can just go on and on and on and on and on because it's really exciting to you, like this is what you do, you know what I mean? But look, no one else really cares, which is fine, that's fine. But it's exciting when you get to talk about it, for sure.
We can talk about bugs for hours and try to find people who are like,
Right. Absolutely.
But I think too, if you do find a scientific paper, here's a little tip. And you find a scientific paper and you like it and you want to know more about it, or you don't get access to it because you can't subscribe, sometimes you can actually reach out to the head researcher and email them, and they will send you the paper for free because a lot of them do not like the paywalls either, and they want people to know about what they are studying and what they are doing. And I've had a lot of success with that. And they get excited when other people are interested in their research and want to talk about it. So don't hesitate to reach out to people, and don't be intimidated, right? Because I mean, we're all up here on the panel, but we're all people too, and you know, we're here because we like to geek out about the things we like, you know, and I'm assuming that's why y'all are here too. So don't hesitate to reach out because chances are you will find people really excited to talk about the questions that you have about biology.
So I remember when the first Blade movie came out, I think I was maybe 11, 12, and I had so many questions because they treated vampires like a biological scientific species, not just magic, and they could regrow limbs and had super strength. And so I was like, I have so many questions. And my mom worked at a university at the time, so one day I was at work with her, and I just walked my little 12-year-old butt over to the science department, and went over to a friend of hers who was in developmental biology, and I was like, hello, I would like to know about how regrowing limbs work. And then and just looks at me and like, is this like a stethoscope? It was like, no, I'm just curious and so we had a very long conversation about cell division, mitosis, like cell cycles and whatnot, how muscles work in terms of generating physical strength and force and whatnot. And maybe I was just a very charismatic 12-year-old, but if a 12-year-old child can walk up to us and we're super enthused to talk about these things, anyone can come up and pretty much probably at least ask, and there's going to be a good amount of enthusiasm and willing to talk about stuff that we really love. Along with talking with people, so many used bookstores and places will have textbooks that are only maybe a couple of years old, and are really, really cheap in terms of getting just some intros to a lot of different topics in biology, in physics, in chemistry. And so those are resources that I have often used where I have just gathered a bunch of various textbooks on certain things. And even if they're a little old and slightly out of date, a lot of the still basic fundamental principles haven't really changed, so they're still very useful in that particular sense. It's only going to be really more modern, specific research things that you're going to want something that's like a more recent article. And then another resource that I find is also really helpful is that PBS Studios has an entire set called Crash Course, and they have Crash Course Biology, Crash Course Physics, Crash Course Chemistry, where they're pretty much walking you through all these concepts to do like a degreed level, but in a way that is like for someone who's probably not familiar with these concepts before, and they're broken down into very specific subjects with each little episode that they do. And so that I found has been really helpful in just kind of like understanding certain things, just having a video series. Plus you can like pause and rewind if something doesn't make sense. Rewind is such a weird word now, and when you just see like you scroll back, like a group of VCRs. So yeah, where's my clicker? That's the word. That's what we call them back in my day. So those are some resources that I find are really helpful in those particular subjects. And amusingly, there are also usually a decent number of people who will like look at comic books and like try to figure out the physics and science of them, and that can be pretty useful, including me. Like I have a bunch of things on the internet that I talk about science and different topics, and those will usually be also some good resources to be like, oh, I might want to go this route, or this is a very bad explanation, maybe I should avoid this.
Jim Kakalios at the University of Minnesota, his book, The Physics of Superheroes.
I own it.
I know you're my father, but how dare you shout out during my panel? Yes, so fantastic resources, including Jim Kakalios, but yeah.
I have another resource. Possible? I mean, I get a newsletter every week sent to my work email and my personal email, and it's just all about bacteriophage research, because we share that with each other all over the world. This particular newsletter is called Capstan and Tail, but you can just literally just put your email in and start receiving it, because again, scientists want to share what we're researching with anyone. So I'm not sure how you would find a particular newsletter that you were interested in, but I'm guessing you could probably just Google it.
And I love that idea, because there is so much great information out there that's free, that you just have to kind of dig a little bit to find it. And one of the other things I highly recommend you do is dig into the resources that your local area has. So community education classes are constantly going on. I know people who allow, so I'm a beekeeper as well, and they allow people to shadow them as they do beekeeping. And people who can come and learn about ducks or bats, or, you know, there's so many local resources as well that are out there in your community that you might not know about, that you just gotta do a little bit digging in, maybe like your community newsletters, or some of the things that come in the mail that you might toss in recycling. They might have things that will help you understand or learn more about what you're interested in.
Again, we're gonna get to questions in just a minute, so hold on for approximately 12 minutes and we will get to your questions. So yes, to recap, we just said a lot of resources. So humans, newsletters from humans, emailing humans to get their papers, textbooks, especially secondhand ones that you can get on the cheap, PBS Crash Course. What else did we say?
Well, some universities offer free classes.
Yes, classes,
yeah.
especially in the community. All right. So,
Be an adult 12-year-old.
yes, be a charismatic 12-year-old. We will probably not get through all of these in the next 12 minutes, but how about, since we've already brought up an example of fiction that did a great job of incorporating biology in a pretty subtle and smooth way, we hear of some other sources that people could go to see biology done well, and maybe a quick word on how they incorporate it in a way that feels natural.
You got a phone call. You got a
I have one thing. Can I talk about a pet peeve? Okay, I have one thing. that just drives me bananas, and my poor partner knows because I rant about it every time it happens. So when there is an eagle in a show, when there's like a bald eagle flying overhead and you hear a scream, it is usually the scream of a red-tailed hawk, because actual bald eagle noises sound like wet chickens. They make it, and it drives me crazy. And I feel like maybe I'm the only one who catches this, but I bet there are others. And when it's noticeable like that, it kind of pulls you out of, and makes you think like, well, they clearly didn't do their research. One of okay, so I'm also a huge gamer, and I've been hooked on Red Dead Redemption 2. And one of the things that I deeply appreciate about that game is it's so accurate. The animal sounds are accurate. The way they move, it's very accurate. The way you would hunt them is, I mean, in a game, it's as accurate as you can get. The fishing is actually pretty damn accurate. And the plants, locations in the biomes are pretty spot on. And so when it's done well, it immerses you into that environment, and it's so satisfying. And I used to play Skyrim, and but I've moved on, and it's so satisfying to see it done right, and to feel like it's clear that they did their research, and I know there's this whole, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but they actually did research on horse testicles and how they shrink in the cold to make sure it was 100% accurate. And I mean, like, that's an attention to detail that, like, I mean, I can't imagine getting that request. Could you research this? And because we want to get it right. But I mean, I appreciate that. I appreciate that attention. I mean, it's a little too much, but it's one of the things that makes it believable, that makes it realistic, that immerses you into that world and makes you love it because it's so detailed. So yeah, it's definitely one that I really, really am enjoying right now.
And it sounds like it works for a lot of the same reasons the show you mentioned earlier works, in that it doesn't drag the science in front of you and be like, we're going to learn about horse testicles now. But it's like you sit in a place where it was all figured out behind the scenes, and then you just get to experience it. So that sounds one of the great ways of science working in media is when you don't see it, but you live it.
All I can think about is like the YouTube channel with like true facts about the octopus. Yeah. No, Jerry, I don't want you to Google horse testicles and temperature. So some examples that actually come to mind, at least also in terms of just like where there'd sometimes be a little bit of explanation, but it was more in the detail and how the world was designed. A couple of different shows I watched, one being Farscape. And that is a world where main character, he gets shot through a wormhole to a distant part of the galaxy and universe where there's all these different alien beings, and they go really into they're very like extensive in like the biology of all the different characters. Like one of the characters, Rigel, they clearly make it that he has multiple stomachs. They make that he's partially amphibious. And there's a lot of detail in like, there was a clear biological design for his species that evolved on whatever planet that they have. And they talk, and their biology comes up, and the chemistry of like why their bodies react in certain ways also comes up. There was one episode where people were being exposed to a particular, it was kind of like a mind control like organism that was going through their bodies, but as a part of the result of it is that once it left your body, it increased the level of acidity that was in some of your tissues. And so one of the characters brings like, wait a minute, grabs a blanket from her room and it's like, lick this. And it's like, why? Because honestly, it's a litmus-based fiber, lick it and licks it and it changes color because again, because of how fibers react to highly acidic substances. And I really love those attention to little details. And it was a very bizarre show though. Like weird stuff happens in Farscape, including straight up like gods and magic showing up, but it never really left, it always really maintained a sense of like the biology and how things worked, just like on a basic scale. I even love the overall discussion of like one of the main characters, Moya, a living ship, and her biology and how her biology would be affected by things that would be happening in the environment. Like she was mechanical, but also a mixture of organic components as well, and alive. And she also gives birth to them at some point in the show, which is like really interesting and cool and crazy and like very big laser for like a big C-section thing kind of going on. But yeah, it was just a really cool show, and something that also was had a very whimsical and bizarre feel to it. The level of like detail that was in just the look of biology, I really appreciated. And similarly for a lot of sci-fi original shows like Stargate, SG-1, and Atlantis did that, I thought, very well. Maybe a little bit loose and wild with some of the biology when they got into like the Wraith on Atlantis. But I also with that, but I give a little bit of extra leeway if you're gonna give me cool space vampires. So, but yeah, those are a couple of examples that I really thought were just good uses of not only just like having like moments having good biology in the show, but not necessarily going out of their way to over-explain it as well. There's even one episode where the characters got shrunk, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense. It's like, you know what? We don't have time to figure this out. We are shrunk. We're like, because he's like, well, we can't reduce the number of cells. That wouldn't make any sense. And if we just change the spacing of our atoms, that would make we couldn't breathe the oral molecules. It's like, I know this is confusing, but you know what? It's happening. We will solve it and figure it out later if we can. They never did, but I did appreciate that one science character was really upset that they had been shrunk, and it made no damn sense.
So, I was thinking about how recently with the combination of like horror and science, and I think that is really, really cool. Like explanations for vampirism and zombies, like before it was just the undead for no reason, and now they're adding science to it. And I think that lately, like I really enjoy that because again, that makes me enjoy the horror more. So I'm pretty sure like all zombies now have a scientific explanation, and I think that is very cool. But then also Lower Decks, it's like an animated Star Trek series that's on right now, and Star Trek, you know, is responsible for a lot of the tech in our lives right now, medical tech, everything. So, you know, it's always been very scientific, but also with biology, it gets it wrong a lot, and it's kind of funny. And it does laugh at itself, you know. But Lower Decks really laughs at it. And I just feel like Lower Decks, again, like with the kind of like, if there's something from past Star Trek that didn't make any sense, like Lower Decks would kind of laugh at it and make fun of it, you know? Like that didn't make any sense. So I think that's a good modern piece of media that's out right now that's kind of getting it right.
Like the Tuvix episode. I've seen it.
Yes.
It's hysterical.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think these are all really good examples, and for me, I don't want to pull a specific piece of media, but I do want to mention something that I call the modified gun principle, borrowed from Cory Doctorow, who said, if you're going to mention a gun in a story and you are not a gun person, say the name of the gun, but put the word modified in front of it, and then the gun nuts in the audience will do the work for you of figuring out how the gun can do that thing that you described the gun doing. I think you can do something very similar with other types of specialization. So if you were in biology, and you would need to throw this into your story, and you know there's a point past which you are not going to get this right because it is woo-woo, whatever, you are writing this for the story, find the closest actual point of science you can hinge on, say that and get it right, and then have a character who knows what they're talking about be like, it's derived from that. They diverged evolutionarily, it's like this but different. So many times when authors trip themselves up, I think it's because they are saying too much. Actually, I do want to give an example. I think Ursula Morgan, writing as T. Kingfisher, actually does a fantastic job of this because you can tell she talked to two She will open her horror stories with somebody who explains some of the underlying science, for example, something fungal. And then when things start to go woo-woo, her characters are too busy solving the problem to dwell on how it has diverged from science we understand. And you're left with enough of the science that this is scarier because you understand it a little, without having to dwell on the, okay, but that fungus isn't really going to be sapient. That doesn't make super a lot of sense. So I think that's a wonderful example for my part. And I would love to talk to my beautiful panelists more, but we also have a beautiful audience who might have been neglected. So at this point, I would like to open for questions. I do ask that you keep it either general interest biology, or if you have a question that is specific to something that you are working on, try not to preface it at all, just get to write the biology question. If you can, please use the colored sheets of paper, because many of you are obscured, and that'll be much easier for me to see. So, questions now. So your hand first.
Okay. I'm curious how this panel would respond to a comment that I got from one of my D&D players. Elves and humans are technically the same species because they can produce fertile offspring.
So this actually has come up because, you know, I live and talk to nerds all the time. But first off, neat thing, the definition of species is extremely wonky, and we are still in a great deal of debate over are Neanderthals a different species or subspecies, or are we all part of the same species and that's like a variation of it? And like the point of divergence to where something like is just really, really weird. And there is a particular point where two individuals cannot interbreed anymore. But within that category, like we're still not really sure how to define what is a different species or not. So because there's a lot of differences between like Neanderthal, Homo erectus, and all these other categories, you could theoretically have a world where different individuals in a ill-defined species could have very wildly different phenotypes. But also, this doesn't include elves, it also includes dwarves, it would also include orcs, this would also, and because they haven't, also include dragons. And one of the things that we've talked about is that since in most of these universes, dragons are the oldest, longest living things, that most likely everything else is just a descendant of some kind of dragon, is what we came across. Or that the common ancestor of all things is dragon, or was a dragon-like entity. And we're all just like really poorly designed dragons. Or we're dragons that adapted so well to some other niche that we lost all of our dragon coolness. Unless you breed with another dragon and become dragonborn and get some of your cool dragon traits back. But yet, depending on how you want to kind of define the species, you could define elves and humans as different species, but also we have not had a consensus on how to define it. So yes, some definitions would put all the things in a D&D universe that can interbreed into one species. So humans and dragons, piecing it up together.
No, I was just going to interject. So all domestic duck breeds species are descended from wild mallards, all of them. The ones that have the poofs on their head, the floofy feathers, the big Peking duck ones, they're all descended from mallards, wild mallards that were domesticated, and they can all interbreed with each other, even though some of them are technically considered very separate species from each other, and they look very different, and sometimes the mechanics aren't always the same between the species, but they can breed and produce fertile offspring even though they look, and sometimes their niches in the environment are quite different as well. So it does happen in real life. It is a thing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like it's usually like a chromosomal number issue, you know what I mean? Like, but it's happening on Earth.
Yep.
Like you don't need, and that's I actually say that a lot. Is like humans, like there's so many amazing things on Earth. yet we like invent these other creatures, and it's like they're like octopus. Like that's amazing. Like what, you know what I mean? Like why do you need a minotaur or whatever? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying we shouldn't have that, but it's just like I don't know. It's like that's already happening on Earth. Like Earth is really cool. You know what I mean? Like yeah.
Biologists get fired up about species delineations, so if you want to talk for hours more about that, find any of that. I'm going to grab yellow hashtag next.
Okay, yes, I was just going to say, my companion on that, the elves and humans and orcs, was incompatible perching rituals.
That is a thing in wildlife biology. You will have some species that, so there was a species of chimpanzee or ape, I can't remember, where it was very male-driven. Females were abused a lot and taught to be submissive, but they had their group next to a toxic waste dump, and all the males would go over there to eat, and they all ended up dying. And so the females ended up taking over the group. I want to say it was like bonobos or something.
It was baboons.
It was baboons.
It was baboons.
Baboons. Yes.
Like the
And
pinnacle of jerk primates.
After us,
The females did raise the next generation to be much less toxic masculinity.
Oh, gentle males ended up taking on more, as we say, nurturing traits, and it actually became very peaceful. They were very friendly with each other and could not interact with other baboons of the same species because they had become completely different as far as behaviors, hierarchies, and interactions. And it's just absolutely fascinating.
So like so a mass email to all the toxic males. There's a big buffet happening on this.
All right. Again, we could talk about species concepts forever, but I know our chartreuse, light green, individual up here has been waiting for a while.
It was just like a play off of the stuff that kind of takes you out of the story because it does make sense. And like Juniper Rising, there's one time they had their shoes that were powered by the quadratic formula. And anyone who's ever been in middle school is like, wait, that's powered by finding the triangle? What?
Unlimited energy of hypotenuse.
Powered by the quadratic formula, aren't we all? Yes. Star, I know you've been waiting as well.
I wanted to thank Brittany for mentioning community education. I have a comment that's not biological, but it's a really good example of what we're up against. So I teach a really good astronomy class to adults in community education, and whenever it's offered, the astrology class that's 4 times as many students. My class is one night. Her class is twice as many people, 2 nights a week.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't hear that, yep. Astrology gets more play at community ed than astronomy these days. Things are dire. Orange asterisk.
Do you have recommendations of how old textbooks or research should be to be valid?
Depends on what you're looking for. If you are looking at paleontology, grab stuff from the 70s, it's probably not that wrong. Other fields, what would you say?
I would say microbiology, no more than 7 years. Things change so much. We're learning more. When I was in college, I was taking an astronomy class, and by the time I took my test, did great, was watching like Discovery, and the things on my test that I had gotten right were already wrong.
Oh, yes.
I think ecology, yeah, I mean, it doesn't change drastically, but we learn new things all the time that we have to incorporate into how we manage species or how we deal with, problems in an ecosystem. And how we deal with invasive species especially changes constantly because there are new invasives. And so I think for ecology, yeah, it's probably got to be fairly recent depending on what specifically you're looking at.
Can you give a ballpark number of years?
Oh, probably 4 or 5.
Marine biology?
Marine biology, probably 6 or 7. Marine biology, for the most part, is pretty figured out as far as what kinds of species are out there. We don't know a lot about how they interact, especially if we're talking deep species, like deep sea species. But the composition of the oceans is changing a little bit, so that might be different. But we've cataloged a lot of what's in the ocean, and there's still a lot that we haven't. So you can also kind of play around with that a little bit. So yeah.
Probably the longest you're going to be able to get is going to be things that are in like chemistry and physics, and then like math textbooks, which you can push probably back as far as like probably 15 years. However, those still tend to be, an issue there is like tend to be written with a particular kind of like culture or worldview perspective, which can come through in really weird ways that are just that I find can be kind of a little flawed. Also, sometimes the way that math will be explained in those things, there are better ways that they are explained in like more recent kind of textbooks. But the only useful, I guess rare useful things about capitalism is that because of the desire to like always have the most recent textbooks be the most relevant, a textbook that costs like $200 the year that it comes out may be dropped down to like $20 by the time 4 or 5 years. Like, yeah, even like next year. So it's very rare that you'll need to find that anything that is like anything that's like between like 3 to 5 years old is going to be a lot cheaper than anything that's coming out that year, and is going to be well within that window of all this information is completely valid and up to date for what it's using for. So yeah, I would go anything like between like 2 to 5 years is going to be a good window to find something that is inexpensive but also pretty up to date.
All right, we are super short on time, so if somebody's confident their question is quick, I will take one more. And I see orange X is the only one standing, so.
Okay, so you mentioned you can email people to get a copy of their paper, but you also, there's something around like the head writer. Are there like academic cultural things that we should be conscious of when requesting to get a copy of the paper?
Fantastic question. So oftentimes when you're looking at a scientific article, there will be something indicated called the corresponding author that is standard in pretty much all biojournals. That is the person you want to email. However, if they don't respond, most of the other people on that paper are going to have access to copies. The last name in the list is going to be the name of the person whose lab it was. They are often very busy, but they also had a big stamp of influence on that paper, so they're likely to have access to it off the top of their email.
And sometimes the lead researcher will be like one of the first names on there. And they are also usually very busy, but sometimes are really thrilled people are reaching out to contact them about their work.
That first author might be a grad student or a postdoc.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I'm going to give my panelists a chance to give final thoughts, plug anything else you're going to be in at the con.
Oh, me. Oh, I'm done. This is my last panel, but I will be around and so I have ducks and chickens and bees, and we'll talk about them for days. And insects too, just in general, because I'm doing another master's in entomology, and so bugs are just, I love them. But I teach English at Century College, so that's like my day job. I think enjoy science, enjoy biology. I think one of the most enjoyable texts that I've read with good biology, you can tell that the writer was really interested in what they were writing about. Write about the kind of biology you're interested in, because the readers are going to be able to tell that you're enjoying it. So that's my big piece of advice.
I have a panel tomorrow over here in STEM. Also, I wanted to say, I'm glad I remembered, the DNR, the local, probably, if you're not from Minnesota, your DNR as well, has a ton of volunteer opportunities like a ton, and then you can go out there and do real research for fun. And you can learn a ton doing that and become an expert and a scientist and yeah.
So yeah, because that would be me now.
That's it, yeah.
All right. Yeah, so there's just so much cool and interesting things in science and in biology and in nature. And I think just taking the time to just kind of be humble and just really like taking that in and just enjoying it, it can be very, very, very fulfilling. And being able to see that recreated in stories is something that I really enjoy. I think I have panel-wise, I've got, let's see, it's, yes, I'm on the Spy Family panel at 5, and then the Monsters of Sex panel is at 10. So yeah, it should be pretty entertaining. And yeah, just like, I'm so happy that everyone was able to come out and talk with us about really cool biology, so.
Yeah, this was my one and only panel for the weekend, so if you cannot get enough of me, you'll have to track me down in person, but I would love to talk with anyone about stories you're writing, bio, whatever. I'll be in the same wig and horns for the rest of the weekend. And I guess if you're going to The Ohio State University, you can come and take one of my classes. But thank you so much to our incredible audience. You've been great. Thank you so much to my gorgeous